May thy servant Camilla, who wears this crown, be filled by thine abundant grace.
There is a room inside Buckingham Palace that almost nobody knows about. No official records mention it. No guided tour pointed out. Even most palace staff have never set foot inside it. But on a cold evening in January 2026, 3 people walked into that room. And when they walked out, the future of the British monarchy had been rewritten. King Charles was one of them, Princess Anne was another. And the third person, someone you would never expect. Not Camilla, not William, not Catherine. A retired palace lawyer. A man who had spent decades drafting secret protocols designed to be used only in the most extreme circumstances. He had been called out of retirement for one reason: to confirm that what Charles was about to do was legal, binding, and irreversible. And when he gave his answer, Charles made a decision that would shatter his marriage, reshape the monarchy, and leave the nation divided for generations. This is not a story about a crown. It is a story about a quiet, calculated coup. One that had been unfolding for years. While the world was busy watching Harry and Meghan's Netflix dramas and book tour, a quiet revolution was happening behind palace walls. And the person at the center of it all, a woman who was never supposed to be queen in the first place. Let me take you back to 2005. Back when Camilla and Charles had that quiet civil ceremony at Windsor Guildhall. The one his own mother didn't even bother to attend. The palace made a very specific promise to the public that day. Camilla would be known as Princess Consort, not Queen. They weren't being humble, they were terrified. Because they knew Diana's ghost still had better approval ratings than Charles and Camilla combined. Forcing a Queen Camilla on the public right after Diana's death would have been a disaster of epic proportions. So they made a promise, a public pledge, a guarantee. And like most promises made behind palace walls when public opinion is at stake, it lasted about as long as a New Year's resolution. The moment Queen Elizabeth passed in September 2022, Charles dragged Camilla right up there with him as Queen Consort without blinking, without hesitation. That old Princess Consort deal was tossed into the trash like an embarrassing receipt from a restaurant nobody wants to remember eating at. The palace acted like this was always the plan, like everyone had simply misunderstood. But everyone else saw it for what it was, a classic bait and switch. And here's the thing the public noticed. They always notice. But this time they didn't erupt in outrage, they just sighed, a collective exhausted sigh. Because at this point, everyone knew the monarchy would do whatever it wanted, whenever it wanted, regardless of what they'd promised. Now, here's the thing about being the most hated woman in Britain for decades. You learn to survive on thin ice. You learn to read the room. You learn to smile when people are screaming at you from the front pages of every newspaper. And Camilla's ice was thinner than anyone realized. Inside the palace, she was reportedly left out of the big loops. You know, the ones you'd expect a queen to be in. Her office was allegedly kept in the dark about succession plans, about the long-term future of the monarchy, about major strategic decisions that would shape the next decade. She got the title, she got the jewelry, she got the seat at the state dinners. But the actual keys to the kingdom were still hidden in a drawer she couldn't reach. The royals were perfectly fine with her wearing the diamonds, as long as she stayed away from the steering wheel. And then there was Catherine. The relationship between Camilla and Catherine was always sold to the public as a cozy, supportive friendship. But behind closed doors, it was allegedly a cold, professional contract. These two women lived in completely different worlds. Their backgrounds, their temperaments, their expectations, everything was a study in contrast. They were polite when they had to be in the same room, They're British royals, so politeness is basically a job requirement. But they weren't exactly grabbing coffee and gossiping about palace staff. Anyone watching them could see the warmth was about as real as a scripted reality show, where the cast members can barely remember each other's names. It looked like two rival diplomats shaking hands for a photo op, perfectly timed smiles, perfectly measured words. And once the cameras were gone, the smiles disappeared, and they went back to their separate corners. But while everyone was distracted by Harry and Meghan's endless dramas, Catherine was quietly building something far more powerful than a friendly smile. She wasn't just showing up to cut ribbons for the cameras. She was playing the long game, and she was winning. Her project on early childhood wasn't just another royal hobby. While most of the family is happy to just stand around looking important, Catherine actually brought in scientists and government officials to talk about neuroscience and early development. This was a serious move into real policy work, the kind that hasn't been seen from a royal in decades. She started talking about data and social impact instead of just posing for boring charity photos. And sources say she was actually getting things done, following through on initiatives. And even the king couldn't ignore the fact that she was becoming the most competent person in the room. Then came the health crisis, and it basically blew up the entire palace playbook. In early 2024, Catherine revealed she had cancer, after abdominal surgery that was supposed to be routine. She came out and said it herself, direct, vulnerable. Completely unlike the usual palace communication style. The world didn't just give the usual polite nod and move on. The reaction was massive and actually felt real. For a lot of people, it was the first time they felt that connection to a royal since Diana died. People were genuinely crying and piling up flowers outside Kensington Palace without being told to by a press release. It wasn't a PR stunt, it just happened. Because people actually liked her. The way Catherine handled being sick reportedly moved her up the ladder. Not just with the fans, but inside the palace walls too. She didn't panic, she didn't retreat, she didn't disappear. She put out that calm video, took her time coming back, and kept her kids out of the mess while dealing with a nightmare that would break most people. By late 2024, sources were telling People magazine that her behavior made King Charles stop and think. He was fighting his own cancer at the time, and he was allegedly asking himself some very serious questions. Who actually has the public's trust? Who has the resilience to carry the crown through a crisis? And who has the spine to keep the lights on when things get hard? The answer was becoming pretty obvious. Catherine was the one on the way up. And Camilla reportedly started to feel the shift, like that weird feeling in the air right before a storm hits. It wasn't one big blowout or a specific argument. It was just a change in the vibe. Suddenly, advisors weren't lining up to talk to her anymore, and the important questions started being sent to someone else's office. By spring 2025, the rumors had become headlines. Major outlets were reporting that Charles was officially moving the heavy lifting from Camilla's desk over to Catherine's. This wasn't about a few extra charity walks. This was a deliberate move to strip Camilla of her institutional power and hand it to the daughter-in-law, who was suddenly the most popular person in the family. People who get paid to watch the royals for a living were actually worried. Because this didn't look like a temporary fix, it looked like a permanent demotion. The real gut punch was how they handled the patronages. In the royal world, patronages aren't just hobbies. They're the only reason these people have a job beyond waving at crowds. Owning a big patronage is like owning stock in the family business. Several of the most important ones, the ones dealing with the arts, books, and hospitals, were allegedly snatched from Camilla and handed to Catherine. These were projects Camilla spent decades building up, showing up for, putting her name and reputation behind. Losing them wasn't just a calendar change, it was a total erasure of her work. The palace basically deleted her career and gave the password to Catherine without so much as a thank you note. And then came the moment that changed everything. According to sources deep inside the palace, Camilla finally snapped. She demanded a written guarantee, a document that would protect her rank, her remaining jobs, and her status. She wanted it in writing that she wouldn't be pushed aside, that her authority wouldn't be diminished, that her position was secure. It was the royal version of a prenup, delivered right when the family was already falling apart from health crisis and public scrutiny. Insiders called it an ultimatum wrapped in polite language, which is just a fancy way of saying she held a knife to the king's throat and called it a request. But when she asked, the answer was a hard no. The king's team basically told her that the monarchy needs to stay flexible, which is code for, we need to follow the person that people actually like, and that's not you right now. They argued that a written deal would tie their hands when public moods change, or when the next person in line needs to take over, or when the institution needs to pivot for survival. The translation of that fancy rejection was simple: no. The palace told her she could keep the fancy title and her spot in the parade, but the actual power was off the table. And Camilla, who had survived decades of public hatred, reportedly went cold. Not angry, not loud, just cold. Because here's the thing about Camilla. She spent half her life fighting to be accepted by a family that hated her. She sat through years of people trashing her in the press, calling her every name in the book, and just kept going until she finally earned a bit of grudging respect. She put in the work, she showed up, she did the job. And now all that effort is being shoved aside. Because the higher-ups decided the brand looks better with a younger face in the frame. They're basically rewriting her job description behind her back, because a better cover girl for the monarchy showed up. After 30 years of being the villain, she finally gets the crown, only to be told she's being replaced by a better model. That's a special kind of corporate hell right there, and the fact that it's happening inside a family makes it even more cutting. The institution always wins, but the people inside it don't always get to keep what they were promised. And Camilla just learned that lesson the hard way. So where does this leave us? Charles is betting the entire future of the monarchy on Catherine. He's trading in the wife for the daughter-in-law, because the brand needs someone people don't actively want to scroll past when they see a headline. And the public has made their choice. Every poll shows that people actually trust William and Catherine way more than the rest of the family combined. Charles is just doing the math. He knows that if the crown is going to survive, he has to lean into the people the public actually likes. This isn't about him being a nice guy. It's a cold strategy, the kind kings have been making for centuries when the survival of the institution is at stake. But the one thing the palace suits can't spin away is the human cost. Camilla spent decades being the most hated woman in Britain. She survived it. She earned respect. She did the work. And now she's being pushed aside. The palace has been perfecting this move for centuries, taking away someone's power while letting them keep the fancy title. It's a quiet, calculated way to make a role completely worthless without making it obvious to the public. And Camilla just became the latest victim of a machine that has been grinding up people for hundreds of years. The crown always wins, but the people wearing it sometimes lose everything. So now you know the full truth behind Camilla's fall from power. But what happens next involves someone we haven't even talked about yet. And that story might be even more surprising. If you've made it this far, hit like, because stories like this don't stay buried for long. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Charles made the right choice? Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next.